Hi, I'm Kevin,
And I'm Amanda.
and we are serving up.
All that jam. A lighthearted look at the weekend jam bands.
Where we break down the jam scene's biggest stories,
Talk new bands
upcoming tours.
and show reviews. A little laughing, some hot takes, and an always positive message for the community.
Week of September 10th, Scott McMicken.
Welcome to year 2 of All That Jam. We're excited that you're here with us today. I'm Kevin,
Hey, I'm Amanda.
and you are listening to the All That Jam weekly wrap-up, a lighthearted look at the weekend jam bands. Amanda and I made some big moves over the last week and got to spend some time together to map out the next year. We ended up doing our first show, so to speak. You want to recount how that happened and who we had come out to play, Amanda?
Oh, I'd love to, Kevin, because it was really special. So as you know for sure, and anyone out there who's been listening, you may have seen that Ari Joshua had been a guest on the show probably a couple months ago. It was a great conversation, and we kept in touch. Now, Ari, as you know, Kevin, is one of those musicians, I think, as we say, where he's recorded with so many people that we love, like members of MMW, Tab. He's based in Seattle, and he really wanted to get a little bit of traction and maybe a foothold here in the Denver music scene. And so we were trying to find some space for him. This week in Denver, that has kind of built up around Fish Sticks weekend, is so busy. And we're able to find some space at Revival Public House here in Denver downtown for 2 shows, their afternoon shows, free. And then Ari got his friend Marcus Rizak to join him. And honestly, it was 2 fantastic afternoons.
Very nice. Yeah, we have to get Marcus on to talk to him. He's a local guy in Denver there, and they were just fantastic. I mean, some Dead tunes, some Fish tunes, some of their own stuff. It was really fantastic. Can we announce 1019?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. And Amanda, so what's next with the All That Jam having live things going on?
Oh my gosh, Kevin, I am also so excited about this. In October 19th specifically, we are going to be co-hosting an event at New Conscious here in Denver with Galaxy Jams Reacts. Mike, Eli, the team over there. Also have just gotten to know them really well, love what they do. And probably about 6 months ago, started talking with New Conscious about this idea, sent a proposal over. The team there is amazing. And so we've got the green light, we've got the artist agreement signed by All That Jam, and we're now basically recruiting fantastic artists and industry people to come and listen to some music with us live, and then have some kind of super jam collaborative music thing happening late night.
Fantastic. So everybody out there, look for more on our socials about that soon. We're going to be doing blasts for that. Some of the artists that are going to be sitting in, you'll find out because they're going to be mentioning it. As for the business at hand, this week we have the top 3 stories coming up. We have an interview with Scott McMicken from Dr. Dog on his Press One cassette label. We talk the label, we talk lo-fi recording. He does something called the School of Song. And the last clip we have is what I'm calling the Zen of Failure, because he has this beautiful outlook on music and what he's doing. And also, we're going to have a little bit about the Wook flu, because if you couldn't tell, Amanda's a little under the weather. But before we get into all that, Amanda, let's run through the past 10 days or so. Wednesday, a week ago, two Wednesdays ago, we got to see Gorilla Toss. And for me, it was the best way to start a few days of Fish. They were amazing. They did 2 full sets, kind of enough, and they were kind enough to spend some time with us and really set the mood for the whole run. You spent some time at some after shows also. Do you want to talk a little bit about them?
I would love to. Yeah, I took a slightly different take this year for Fish Sticks weekend, which really has become our jazz fest out here in a way, I guess, not to make a false comparison, but there's so much music happening. So yes, Wednesday, seeing Gorilla Toss with you and some of the Wook Plus family was fantastic. And I agree, great energy, perfect way to start that week off. Thursday night, I was at New Conscious for DJ Logic with Ben Atkin from Goose, Nate Edgar. Who else was with him? Kevin, can I pull that up? I totally am having
No, go ahead. You can pick it up if you want to start with and then say the names, however you want to run it.
All right. Where that? So then went to New Conscious on Thursday night for a late night that started probably around 12:30 or 1. That was a DJ Logic and Friends group that had played already together this past summer, featuring Eddie Roberts, Ben Atkin from Goose, of course. We also had Nate Edgar. And then for this particular session, we had Joey Porter on keys, of course, with the motet, which was phenomenal. Friday night, I skipped late night, but Saturday and Sunday, I was back. Saturday, Electric Beethoven, again at New Conscious. And Kevin, I've been telling people this, and I've had enough time to think about it. I'm going to say that Electric Beethoven show, top 3 in the last year or even 2 for me. Amazing. And got to spend some time with Brian Haas, of course, who we've had on the show afterward, and it was fantastic conversation. Sunday night, I rounded out all of the late night festivities with Bone Diggers over at Cervantes with Reed Matthews again, and then a whole slew of Bay Area artists, including folks from ELO and Thievery Corporation. And Kev, that was kind of a star-studded event. We had folks from Live for Live Music there. Ari Fink was there. And really, it was a fantastic time.
Yeah, I'm kicking myself for not going to Electric Beethoven. I was having a moment, and as I've learned over my life, you don't make decisions out of fear, and I was making a decision out of not terrified fear, but I was in my head too much, and I'm kicking myself for not doing the Electric Beethoven with you, because you got to hang out with Brian a little bit, who has been on the show and is just the kindest person in the world. And I probably miss meeting him in person more than anything.
It was great. And I have to say, though, it was not for the faint of heart, because I got home a little after 5 a.m. So, you have to factor all of these things in, especially, Kevin, after several nights of Phish at that point.
Right. And I could have, like, Sunday, if I had gone out Saturday night and I had slept through that Sunday Phish show, not to poo-poo on Phish, but it was a festival set. There was no bust out. There was no exceptional jam. I was tired anyway, And I think you did the smart thing with that.
Well, of course, not knowing at the time what was going to happen, I came home, after that second afternoon with Ari and Marcus, dropped you all off at the show, and then took a little nap. And as I'm doing that, I'm getting all these notifications about the delays and, everything. So stuff happens. It's tough to know ahead of time what that's going to be like.
It is. Next year, I'm not buying a ticket ahead of time. If I
Me
go
either.
in, I go in. And with that, let's jump into the
top 3 stories of the week.
All right. Got some great stories this week. Wanted to start with one that has been kind of popping up on my newsfeed, and I was excited to dig in a little bit. This is all about the Annapolis Baygrass Festival. This is a new one for me. And what I wanted to kind of share with this story is that this is a festival that's aiming for education and conservation through music. So this is not a new festival. They're going to return to Sandy Point State Park right on the Chesapeake Bay on September 30th and October 1st, 2-day festival. So the event's name kind of feels like a play on words for a bluegrass festival, but there's so much more going on underneath. Maybe we'll post some links, let you all read about it. But a big part of the mission for this festival is creating awareness and conservation efforts for the Chesapeake Bay. There's a lot of pollution, a lot of algae growth, just some things happening there that, are not good. And so the festival wants to affect change, educate people just by bringing awareness to this cause. And there's also going to be lots of information there, and just different food and stuff like that to kind of bring in the local culture of the area and help people realize how important this is. So definitely check that one out. There will be nonprofit partners on site like Watershed Steward Academy, and Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. So
And,
wanted to
and
mention
we
that.
will have the link. We will have a link down in the show notes, so you can go over and check that out. I have never been to this festival, but I am very aware of it, and I've always been. I bought the license plates, the last car I had for the Chesapeake Bay Fund, because it's one of the true unique geographical areas, whatever you call that, ecosystems in the world, and we do damage to it all the time. So it's fantastic to see these musicians, a lot of them not from around here, coming out to support that cause.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't realize quite how big the Bay was. That watershed encompasses parts of 6 different states. You know, there's millions of people who live and work in that area. So definitely something that, you know, we should be aware of. And I thought of you when I saw this one, of course.
Have you ever driven the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel Road from uh, Virginia Beach up to Maryland?
I have a couple times growing up on the East Coast. That's definitely something that I've done. And that's a hard one to forget. It's really beautiful.
Apparently, it's one of like 2 or 3 things you can see from outer space. That, the Great Wall of China, and something else.
No kidding. I didn't know
Yes, it's kind of crazy.
that. Yeah,
And we digress.
That's what we do. And I didn't realize this, but my second story this week is kind of about another festival that's giving back. But I'm actually really glad to see that. This is about Borderland. Now, this one's coming up sooner. This is coming up at the end of this week, of course, September 15th through the 17th at Fort Knox State Park in New York. I just was reading that this festival is going to host something called Sober Space, and that is presented, of course, by Trey's Divided Sky Foundation. I had not heard anything about this yet, but this is supposed to be a sanctuary, a retreat, and an inclusive sober space for sober attendees. From what I've read, this is the first of its kind presented by Divided Sky at any major music festival, in partnership with 1 Million Strong, which is an initiative that really wants to support people that are impacted by substance abuse. So in this situation, people who are going to the festival and maybe their friends can use that space to meet each other, you know, a kind of a neutral meeting spot, relax, get some non-alcoholic drinks, and then learn about the Divided Sky Foundation. So I just think this is incredible, and I'm really happy that something like this is
It's kind of expanding on the Wharf Rat fellowship table things that you'd find at dead shows and fish shows.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? I think we'll hear a lot more about this after the festival too. There's so many bands there, of course, you know, headlined by Tab, Goose, Mo. I mean, there's so much going on. And I have a feeling we'll get some great stories of how festival goers were able to use that space in a really positive way.
Yeah. Now let me ask you, we did a story a few weeks back on a festival that was catering or trying to be more inclusive for people with disabilities, with the picture with the wheelchair who was crowd surfing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about it? I find this interesting. You know, all 3 of these festivals have kind of embraced something to try to bring people in and say, yes, this is a good space for you to come, whether you're, hey, I want to support the Bay, or you feel like maybe going to festivals is overwhelming because of all the craziness that goes on.
Well, you know what? I think that maybe over time, as music festivals and the companies and people that produce them, you know, just really get more in tune with kind of what people's needs are, it is great to see this happening. And I think that there's a lot of things that can also be done, and people are creative. So we'll have to just see, you know, what's next. All right, Kevin. All right, now this third story, I have a couple feelings about. So I'm just going to share it the way that I do, and then I'd love, Kevin, to get your thoughts on it. Universal Music Group has basically initiated a new royalty model. I believe this is the first of its kind. Now, this is what it is meant to do. It's going to boost popular artists by agreeing to new terms that will give higher payouts to professional artists over other content. And I'll just share a little more detail about that, and then we can get into this. So this new streaming deal, which is with a French music service, Deezer. So this is probably not something, at least right now, that's going to really impact maybe United States-based listeners or other people. But they're going to count a single listen as 2 listens on what they call popular tracks, basically giving them more revenue than those that are not considered popular. Currently, platforms like Apple Music and Spotify divide payments based on total listens, regardless of who made that track or what it is. But now these professional artists will see payout increases of probably 10% or more, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you put it into certain terms, it could be something that they notice, not sure. Artists need a minimum of 1,000 streams per month by at least 500 separate users. So now, Kevin, we are fully quantifying everything about streaming listening. So tell me, what are your initial thoughts on this?
I think it goes in exactly the wrong direction. I would say that you're reducing payments per stream for songs with less than 1,000 listens or artists, professional in quotes. Paying 2 times the rate for an artist, I don't know. It seems like a bad idea. You're diverting money because they're calling these other things noise soundtracks, I think is the term they used. And basically noise bands are independent artists are now going to be subsidizing pop stars, is how I see it.
Absolutely. And the very cynical side of me is thinking maybe this is one drop in the bucket type of change to try to hold off what may be coming down the road at some point, which would be legal action by these artists who have the money and the means to come after streaming services for more. Those are the people and the management groups that are going to be able to, sue for more money over streaming services. Obviously, that's not something that most are going to be able to do. So to me, it feels like a kind of a first step of placating those that really are going to, at some point, probably fight for a little bit more. I can't imagine it would make that much of a difference to them, but it could definitely really hurt even further those independent artists that you mentioned.
Yeah, I just I don't know. It seems like a way to keep Taylor Swift happy. Like she needs more money when, somebody like, a Disco or a Knives or somebody might not ever hit 1,000 a month. So why should they not get the same money when what they did may be better, which is subjective as hell, but it's a slap. It feels like a slap into the face of the people that we support and we love.
Right. And this is just, to me, this was the cherry on top of this whole situation. So according to the press release that came out about this quote unquote artist centric deal helps to protect streaming royalties for artists by disincentivizing amateur tracks. But here's the thing, less than 10% of all the streams last year in 2022 were detected as fraudulent. So it's just bullshit, basically.
It is. It's to placate somebody and to get a good headline. Because if I went on social media, looked around, and lots of people are rah, and the pundits are all saying, yeah.
Not us,
yeah. So, all right, cool. And that's going to wrap that up. But on a similar note, we're going to get into this interview with Scott McMicken. He was in Dr. Dog. Now he has a band called The Ever Expanding. And he got way metaphysical with us, if you remember, Amanda. And this first clip, not so much, but we got into Scott's press on cassette label, which I wonder how many of those songs are getting 1,000 streams by 500 unique listeners a month, that he can be considered professional when the man has been at work for 20 plus years.
Right.
So let's jump into that and we'll see you on the other side. So that kind of coalesced with quarantine, the pandemic. You said 3 years ago, right?
Yeah. We had been talking about and sort of getting the pieces in place to start our cassette label, which basically meant like trying to get a website made and stuff. And that was taking a really long time. But I think I think we already had the cassette label going before the pandemic. I say 3, like my concept of time is so nebulous. Like 3 years to me is kind of this catch-all. But yeah, you're right. 3 years ago was essentially prime pandemic time. But I think it was the year before that we started Press On. And yeah.
I call it COVID year.
Yeah, it's a wash.
It's like 30 months. So can we go into? I had this thought while you were talking about the 4-track, which is, you've been described as lo-fi recording, especially the earlier stuff. Do you think that influences the songs that you wrote as opposed to having access to a 64-track professional studio? Would that change? Does your writing change being in those different situations?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I mean, I think we always applied that 64 channel option mindset even to a 4-track. We would really get into like figuring out how to, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of music out there made that way. I mean, in many ways, the sort of the iconic music of the 60s and stuff is 4-track music with a 64-track mindset, like figuring out how to squeeze all that sound into those few tracks and all of the ways in which that forces a certain type of process and a certain mindset of commitment, where compared to now, where you can do all 64 and leave them isolated and contend with them as you go. But in the earlier days before that technology, you just had to know in advance what it was you wanted to do, and you had to do it and lock it in. And in order to move on to add more, you had to bounce it all together and be stuck with it. And so that sweet spot is, I mean, I have a studio here in Asheville right now, and I've never been more enthusiastic and blown away by the sort of holistic process of recording music. And the whole thing is occurring on an 8-track, 1-inch machine, which to me, 8 tracks now feels pretty luxurious, because you can record a whole live band on 8 tracks very, very meticulously, and leave yourself 1 or 2 tracks to then bounce your band down and add more overdubs or whatever. So there is just something, it's not, and especially at this point, I might have thought 10 years ago that it was a nostalgic thing, or I might have come down pretty heavy handed about the old way versus the new way or whatever. It's not like that for me anymore. It really just feels like those limitations actually do encourage and increase the odds of me being a part of something that is aligned with what I want to hear, which is musicians being present, being soulful, being themselves. All of those are the utmost virtues for me in terms of the quality of the music. And all of those virtues are made much harder to attain when you're constantly able to fend off your decision making till later in the process. So to just simply be in a room with some musicians, look around, know you're all feeling a certain shared vision, and that you're all going to be delivering the most present version of yourself that you can towards this one goal, and then doing it, and then ending and knowing something just happened in this room, regardless of what was captured. A musical event occurred here in this little room. If the microphones were on and the tape machine was rolling, then essentially our job is done. And it sounds so simple, but as it's re-emerged into my way of thinking, largely due to Shebang and the way we made that, the more I've realized like how amazing music is. It's the technological side of it is also amazing, but it's distracting from a certain core value set of values that have more to do with performance, collaboration, and communication, and all of these sort of deeper universal things. That's where it's all at for me now. And I just know that on a personal level, if I'm engaging with the process in a way with all of the sort of advancements of modern technology, at least at this moment in time, I find it harder to get at the goal I'm trying to get at, which is to just say that it's more of a strategy to lean into those parameters and into that analog side of things. And it's by no means motivated by a belief that you can't make good music digitally, or that digital doesn't sound as good. I'm constantly ping-ponging that, because in many ways it'd be so much more convenient to rely on my little computer than this rusty old 8-track that I'm scared every time I hit record if it's going to make it to the end of the song. You know, I've been doing a session with a band, and we started a week ago, and about every couple of days I lose another track. We're down to 5 tracks. And so I'm having to tell the guitarist, like, just going to need to put your guitar over there by that other mic on that other guitar. You know, it's the best we can do. But that technology is not reliable. So it would be nice if I could figure out a nice little mental lane to get into where I could feel as though I'm focused in the same way, but not needing to rely on this precarious technology. But haven't forged that mindset yet. I think that's the ultimate Zen mindset.
Yeah, that almost makes me think about some conversations I've had where kind of thinking about the digital versus analog, and everybody's searching for the filter that's going to get them that analog feel. And I mean, they're out there, right? But
yeah,
to your point, though, there's really, from a process standpoint, that's what you're thinking about, not just even the finished sound. It almost kind of makes me wonder, from live music or kind of a show perspective, it seems like you're almost aiming or able to capture some of that magic that happens on stage through the way that you're recording. That whole idea of, you finish something and then you're going to kind of find out what happened, at some point in the future from that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, it's all pretty simple. It's just like trying to bring what live music is into a studio and not distract from that fact. I mean, that's just where my genuine interest is at right now. That to me is like what's so special about music, really. And it's taken me a long time to really come to that conclusion. But yeah, and it's like I don't think I've ever cared less about what the recording actually sounds like. It's like it has so much more to do. And man, when you dig into it and you have positive, affirming experiences with it, you realize it's all headspace, it's all psychological. There's something about the studio, in quotes, that where when musicians enter the studio, there's something it feels like you have to leave at the door, some level of comfort or spontaneity or playfulness in some way gets kind of like choked upon, because there's like this pressure and this permanence about, and then there's the sort of presence of all of this technology that represents all of this sort of power and manipulation outside of your own expression. There's this whole other layer of, well, what can the studio itself offer the music we're making in terms of how it can present it or manipulate it or capture it? And then you have the whole historical narrative running through your head about, well, that's the same preamp they had at Abbey Road or whatever. So you're seeing your music through some weird, completely abstract idea of what Abbey Road is and all this stuff. You're just dealing with so much crap. And it's everybody, I think, navigates that differently. And it's a spectrum, of course. Some people can walk into any studio and just be themselves and be free and fearless. I think for myself, it's required a lot of effort to realize first and foremost that the best possible situation is that when I'm in a studio, I don't feel any different than I do in my own kitchen or just like jamming with my friends on a porch or whatever. If I can take that entry point into music and embody that and feel that while also in a studio, I think that that just makes the studio that much more of an exciting place, because it's then in the service of the human expression. It's not a bunch of humans trying to tailor themselves to what it means to be in a studio. So, but it's also psychological, and it's beautiful when you're in that mode and you realize everybody's free and doesn't care. And there's nobody worried, like nobody's scared they're going to mess up. You're just playing music just like you would a show. You get to the end of a song at a show and like, oh, we got it, or, oh, that was a little rickety or whatever, but you keep moving forward. The studio doesn't enable that mindset as freely as the show does, but merging those worlds, like you said, the live energy and the live sort of spontaneity and expressiveness, and really figuring out how to make the studio a place that's in service to that has become a huge obsession and really rewarding. I feel like I've been just sort of involved in more and more things rooted in that ethos, and the end result is just really inspiring. And I can't say enough about how much it's just like evolved my love of music, you know?
Kevin, you know that I am a certified cassette-aholic, and so this entire interview to me just came at such a great time, and I cannot wait to get back into this and hear more about some of the other work that Scott does. Before that, though, just a quick reminder, we are at All That Jam Pod everywhere, on all the major social media streaming platforms, at allthatjampod.com also. And then anywhere you get your podcasts, definitely check us out. I know we try to provide as many options as possible for you to find us. But please do like and listen and let us know what you think, or if there's someone you want us to talk to, we would really appreciate that. Kevin also does an awesome job of including a lot of information and context about every clip that's posted, which, by the way, is pretty much every day. So keep that in mind, but let's get back into this interview here with Scott. Now, we also talked to Scott about School of Song, which is something that he founded to help with music education. So let's hear what he has to say about that. Does that translate to School of Song? Because I know that you do some teaching or, online work. Like, how does that, because I know that that's got some, different elements on the technology side. How do you kind of bring all that together?
Oh man. Yeah. That experience doing that was that School of Song thing, which was January, 4 weeks in January, my first time ever doing anything like that. And it blew my mind on a number of levels. And I'm still unpacking what occurred by doing that experience, both in terms of me being forced to kind of take inventory on all these years of experiences and where I'm at now, and how to present all that in a way that felt relevant to a person of any level of experience. Really forced me to distill it down to its core values. And then by doing that and feeling as though by doing that, I was learning something myself, and then communicating that and realizing the back and forth that was occurring, the feeling that these things were communicating to people and resonating, and then people were bringing to me further insights and further affirmations of that stuff. So like the whole thing just exploded into this wildly inspiring and sort of emotional ride doing that class. And so absolutely the parallels between songwriting, especially as I've recently discovered through digging in deep into my thoughts and feelings about it via that class, are exactly the same values I'm talking about with the studio, starting here and trying to rewire your fears. I mean, it's all about expression. It's all about naturalism. It's all about honesty, all of it, even when it's crazy and weird and progressive, whatever the end result is aesthetically, it's all sourced from a sense of self, a sense of confidence, a sense of fearlessness, and a sense of exploration. And those aren't natural states of being for a lot of people. You have to really rewire a lot of the baggage and emotional sort of issues that we all have and fears that we all have in order to allow a place where we can just freely be ourselves and express ourselves honestly. And so that was a huge resounding kind of punctuation point to that whole class, was that, yes, we're talking about songwriting, and there's a number of different specific craft oriented notions and exercises and things we can talk about and will talk about, just like with a studio, your choice of your microphone, or is it a computer or a tape machine, or what's your echo, or what, all these specific things are relevant. But really at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day, it's in here and in here, and you need to like fortify this operating system to be free flowing with its ideas. And in order to do so, you have to just realize how important it is to not be afraid and to not judge yourself. I guess you become afraid because there's that sort of implied judgment waiting to happen upon every little gesture you make. And that stuff's real. I mean, that's a part of being a human. It applies through all aspects of our life, not just making art or music. That sort of self-critic. And so yeah, that songwriting class wound up being like a really like nice deep dive in it through another lane into the same set of values, which is like, isn't music beautiful? Isn't it wonderful how much of it is really just us messing ourselves up, you know? And isn't it insane how many distractions there are in this world as musicians and as human beings? And so like being able to dig into it via the songwriting course with a bunch of people, with a ton of people with so many different perspectives, it was really special. I was really stoked on that, because it really did feel like all the work I've been doing in my own life was fast tracked by taking a moment to say, okay, I'm going to take an inventory on what's going on, you know? Like, I don't know. We don't really, I mean, maybe people do this or have found ways to do this as a practice in life, but to sit there and spend a month just saying, okay, this thing that's been a part of my life for 30 years or whatever, I'm going to sit down and try and like put it all into an outline, you know? And you just don't really do that. You just keep rolling forward, taking things on, dropping other things, moving forward. But the exercise of just stopping for a moment in time and saying, okay, this is what it's been for me up until this point. It enabled me to put like some real like bold headlines on some super strong values that I realized were prevalent throughout my entire life as a musician, and realized they're just as relevant and as exciting now as they were 30 years ago. It was really a helpful and inspiring exercise, and 100% linked to the same sorts of values I'm trying to create for myself in a studio environment. And then live, you know, live is just live. It's just ready to go. It's just that moment, you know?
I'm so glad you asked him about that. Probably not something he gets to talk about as much as, you know, the first thing we jumped into was Dr. Dog with him, of course, but fantastic stuff. So if you're listening to this, that means you're going to be listening all week. And I'm going to let you know right now what we got going on. Tomorrow, we got Christopher Machete on Rack and the Art of Improvisation. I had ran into a Facebook interview he did back when they got together in 2014, 2015. And something he said, and he was like, wow, I said that, and we vamped off that for a while. Wednesday, we got Dan Africano on Thievery Corporation and being jam band adjacent. Thursday, Jim Cotta on being a trio and the jam band label. Friday, Ryan Lerman on Scary Goldings. Saturday, we got Will Bumgardner on Playing Funk and Pamlico Sound. And then on Sunday, we got Surprise Chef on playing what they call Cinematic Soul. Make sure that you check all that out. Now, this last clip we're going to get into with Scott, this is what I was talking about, Got Metaphysical. We were talking about, you know, what is success and things like that. And we got into what I like to call the Zen of failure. So let's check that out. And on the other side, we're going to get into the Wook flu.
I love that. I mean, that shows such a growth and a change in perspective, and feels similar to what you were saying earlier about just not having that pressure, or the pressure that we think we need to put on ourselves to do certain things. Totally. And I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about that pressure, you know, and when you realize that's the case, it's pretty fascinating, because it's like, we all know it. It's sort of a trope, you know, like, but when you really realize how deep it is, and also how beautiful the side of things are when you find yourself free, it becomes pretty radical to me. I mean, I find myself talking about it a lot these days, being in context, having a lot of conversations about music at this point in my life. And I realize on the one hand, I'm just stating basic cliches, you know, but the reality of the way that they live in your life and what that actually feels like to move through them, to move through confrontations with pressure, to quell pressure and find freedom. It's an incredibly dynamic thing. And all the implications of what else is going on there in terms of like sharing that with someone else, collaborating, witnessing someone else find freedom. It all, and then the end result of the most radically positive experience is almost just usually like, okay, whatever, high five, cool, moving on. You know, it's not like you sit there floating in space. We've achieved freedom or whatever. You're just living, you know, you're just living easy in a way. And that I keep thinking of it as like this paradox of a low bar, like operating creatively with a very low bar sounds paradoxical in the sense that I'm not talking about diminishing my ambition for a certain level of quality. I'm just talking about understanding that essentially the low bar is the thing that is going to enable you to reach higher heights, just because it's just a way of stating, put the pressure way down. If we fail, of course we fail. Like, who goes through life thinking you're not going to fail at any juncture? But as musicians, as soon as you confront failure, it's like you throw the baby out with the bathwater. You just lose everything inside you. When I realize, rationally speaking, how insane that is, you know, I think operating as though expecting that you're going to fail 90% of the time is a far more righteous way to think than being shocked in the instances when you do fail. And that's what I think of as a low bar. Like, expecting yourself to constantly fail just creates a new psychological headspace where you aren't adding insult to injury by facing all of those moments you will inevitably fail.
I think I needed this conversation today. I'm just going to go on the record for that. I mean, it's really profound. So thank you for sharing all that.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, yeah, it's nice to hear that. I appreciate you saying that.
Do you feel like that you have a point of view as a lyricist?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I have 1,000 of them, really. The containing of multitudes, you know? I mean, more than ever, honestly, because I've learned as well, again, all the parallels between what we're talking about in terms of just fundamental aspects of relating to music, and then the sort of like studio, engineering, performing, live, writing. The parallels are the same in all of it. And I have found that as a writer, I'm doing the same thing about like lowering the bar and not being afraid to fail. And therefore, I'm just trying all this shit that I might have been too afraid to try before. And a lot of times it doesn't work out, but sometimes it does work out. And essentially what's amassing by working this way and slowly gathering instances where these sort of riskier types of behavior are working out is more perspectives. And I've realized by doing so how many perspectives I do contain. I mean, even in terms of like gender neutrality and stuff, like you ask about perspectives, like I'm able to write now from a point of my own femininity in a way, a side of myself I had never really allowed myself to access in life. Well, probably more so in life, but not so much in writing. And so anyway, the more I like just free myself up to try whatever and trust myself, the more I'm finding that I do actually contain many more perspectives than I realized. And I think that's true of all of us. You know, it's just like the complexity of our own emotional network. A lot of things get held in, and a lot of things we really align with and try to sort of wear as a badge, and they become sort of the dominant forces of our identity. But that doesn't mean there aren't a billion other things rattling around in there. And I have been finding on the songwriting side, the more I look for those little hidden corners, the more I feel as though I'm intrigued by what I'm writing, but also like expanding my own idea of myself. And all of that feels good, you know? It makes it all fascinating. That's what I'm saying. Like, the holistic nature of music is nuts. The line between these types of activities and just being a human trying to make your way through this world and continue on an upward path, understanding that upward mobility is this sort of hopefully law of averages, you know? It's like the downs are going to stay, but you're just hoping that it kind of amounts as you're trying to navigate that through life. Like, I feel like music becomes this incredible mirror upon that process, because you're actually just stating these things and then you're putting them on records and they're becoming empirical in a way. You can they're like objects at that point. Without the objects, it's harder to chart, you know? And so that's where music feels like it's at for me right now. It's just like charting the natural progression of life and the complexities of the complexities of your relationship with yourself, the complexities of your relationship with the world and what's going on around you. It all feels pretty open.
This conversation with Scott went in such a profoundly philosophical direction. It made me so happy because to me, that's when you really get to know people. And I thought about this one for a long time. So I'm so glad now that we can share the full interview with Scott because I just think it was really special. Also, perhaps special in a different way, the Wook flu. Now, people have a lot of thoughts on that term. You can use it or not, but let's get real. Especially as some of us get a little bit older, Kevin, it's hard to go out to all these late nights, being in all these places, and then not have that result in some kind of cold or something like that. And so I thought the other day, let me find out what people out there would do. What's their cure for this? So I basically set up some polls and asked some questions on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and You Enjoy My Food, which is, of course, one of the longest running fish Facebook groups and always a good time. And so I have some information here. All together, we got a bunch of responses when I added them all up. A little over 300 people chimed in on this, including...
Wow.
Yeah, I know. See, these are questions people have opinions about. And so that's why I love this, including some friends of All That Jam, Kevin. So I've got some surprises for you. I had basically set it up as pho, ramen, or other because I didn't want to have too many categories. Coming in first with about 53% of the total votes was pho, and that included the great people at Space Bacon voted for pho, and Mike from Galaxy Jams, big fans. Got some really good recommendations for specific types of pho, including from Ty North. Ty was the bassist for Leftover Salmon back in the day. He's played with Keller and Dave Watts recently in the last couple years. He's a huge foodie, Kevin, and so he told me about a turmeric noodle soup that he loves. So got some really specific recommendations.
We need to get him on and talk.
Oh, we will. We will. Let me tell you, we will do that for sure. Ramen was second there with about 28%. And actually, I took somebody's suggestion and got a spicy chicken ramen for lunch today. I had just had delivered, which was great. So love that. And then in the other category, got a couple of really, really good ideas here that you could probably combine. I don't think these have to be mutually exclusive. Dragon Deer mentioned Mezcal as their go-to for the Wook flu. So fantastic. There's actually a Mezcal bar in downtown Denver that I'm going to probably visit when I feel a little bit better. Neil Evans from Dopapod recommended a specific wellness formula and actually sent me the link so I could get it for myself and told me how much to take. So how nice is that? Really appreciate it. We had a bunch of people mention matzo ball soup, and I said I would love that, but I don't know where to get that here in Denver. So if anyone has suggestions. Shots of fire cider, that was Colleen. These are some listeners. Chicken soup with fresh ginger. And then Janine out there just said more wine. So there you go.
All right. I went with, I like Goody's headache powders. You take one of them, you take an emergency, and you take some turmeric, which is a great call with the turmeric. And I shake that up and make a drink it and just try to sleep until my body says, you're okay.
You're okay now. It's okay to wake up.
But the sweating, you get the hot noodles of any kind, either one of those, 75% of the people said, it helps you sweat it out, definitely. Yeah.
So, I mean, look, fantastic stuff there. And that just makes me think about connecting with people. So be on the lookout. I love to do these things. And it's great when we get responses like this. It was really fun.
There we go. So... And remember, just follow our social media and you're going to find all this stuff so you can check it out. You can participate. I mean, 300 people, that's fantastic. So with that, let me tell you, next week we're going to have Lou Faber for our interview. So make sure you come back and check that out. God Street Wine is getting back together for a few shows. I'm going to try to find a way up to Levon Helms Barn up in New York because that's where the second of the two is. we'll see how that works out. Also trying to maybe go see Taper's Choice. They're doing a East Coast Northeast tour there. But whatever you're doing this week, remember, even when you get the Wook flu, stay beautiful, but don't stay underground too long.
Thanks,
All
Kevin.
right.